Welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. I'm really happy to tell y'all about a new course that I am going to be offering with the Catholic Polytechnic University. I've agreed to become an adjunct professor at their university and also do several courses on the Magisterium. The first one being an introduction to the Magisterium. And that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is give you a brief idea about this if you are interested in becoming part of the program. Initially, we are going to do a certificate program, and then hopefully it will evolve into a graduate program. So more to come on that. Catholic Polytechnic University has recently started a theology program. They're known for doing all kinds of things in relation to science, but as part of the humanities department there, theology is something that is beginning. So the program is just starting out, and Chris Plants, who is over the program, is really excited about this and also about helping Catholics and even non-Catholics understand teaching authority better. Both he and I agree that there is a great need for us to understand this. Again, whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to take the course, but I've noticed that this is something that a lot of people seem to be uninformed about. However, material related to the Magisterium seems to be in the background of so many of the discussions that we have, and yet it's something that many of us just don't know much about. And so here's an opportunity for us to grow in our education and knowledge of the subject. I see Deepak in the chat is asking, is this going to be online? So the university is located in Los Angeles, California, but this particular program will be online. So it will be once a week on Mondays around 7:30 p.m. Central. I believe that is 8:30 Eastern and 5:30 Pacific. Double check me on that. But 7:30 Central online once a week on Mondays, 10 lessons for this particular class, beginning June 17th to, I believe, August 19th. So I have already prepared an outline for the course and a syllabus as well. Let me maybe share that with you so you can kind of get an idea about it. You will be able to sign up for this program beginning on Monday. So stay tuned for a link on that. I'll do another stream with a link in that new stream, but I'll also probably add after the fact the link to this existing stream in the show notes. So introduction to the Magisterium. Here's the syllabus. The description, it's an introduction to the Magisterium, and it allows students to establish a foundational understanding of how teaching authority works within the Catholic Church. Now, I am going to be doing other classes after Intro to the Magisterium, but we got to start with introduction, right? Later on, we will talk about creeds, councils, and decrees, and kind of go over the history of the Magisterium, if you will. But this gives you a foundational understanding of how it works, what it is and how it works. So course objectives, the course introduces students to the teaching authority of the Catholic Church. It evaluates the biblical roots of the Magisterium, the organs of the Magisterium, the objects, and the acts. So the organ is who teaches. Object is what is taught. Acts refers to how the Magisterium teaches. We're also going to look at the levels of magisterial teaching, specifically based on the Profession of Faith of 1998, promulgated by St. Pope John Paul II. And then we will take a look at how to evaluate magisterial propositions, among other things. So upon completion A student will be able to demonstrate how the Catholic Magisterium was established, who may teach authoritatively, the scope of Catholic teaching authority, different ways that the Magisterium teaches, the various levels of doctrine, and an ability to evaluate the weight of a magisterial teaching or proposition to know how authoritative something is. Again, 17th of June to August 19th, every Monday, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time is when we will do these. There will be about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of each session. And of course, these will be recorded. So it's live. Anybody who registers will meet on Zoom live, but I will also record it for those who may miss, some of the sessions, or for people who want to go back over the material. As far as the lessons themselves, here's just kind of an outline. At first, we're going to go over the Old Testament roots of the Magisterium, which is something that I noticed is not very frequently talked about. Usually, in most discussions, in most works on the Magisterium, they start out with the New Testament roots, and that's understandable, right? It's understandable. But at the same time, as Christians, the faith didn't start in the New Testament. It started in the Old Testament. And so it's important to look at the concept of teaching authority and authority in general in the Old Testament. And then we can see how the New Testament builds on the Old. So we're going to go over the Old Testament roots of the Magisterium, something that you will very rarely hear about. The New Testament roots of the Magisterium, of course. The Magisterium, again, considered as a subject. Who is teaching? Pope, bishops, as far as the College of Bishops. The Magisterium considered as object. What is being taught? What does the Magisterium have the authority to teach? And what are things that are beyond its scope? The Magisterium considered as act. How does it teach? Definitively, non-definitively. We're going to look at, again, the various levels of teaching authority. We're going to specifically talk about dogmas, then definitive Catholic doctrine, and then authentic Catholic doctrine. So dogmas pertains to the first paragraph of the concluding paragraphs of the Profession of Faith. Definitive Catholic doctrine pertains to the second paragraph, and authentic Catholic doctrine pertains to the third. If you look at the Profession of Faith after the Nicene Creed, you'll see some concluding paragraphs there, 3 paragraphs. And the first one is dogma, second is definitive Catholic doctrine, third is authentic Catholic doctrine. And it's a helpful way to distinguish between different kinds of teachings in the Catholic Church. So we're going to take a look at those in depth. Then we are going to discuss evaluating magisterial propositions. That's an important one. We're gonna take what we learned and really put it into practice. And we're going to look at various instances of teaching authority. And we're going to weigh them, determine how authoritative they are. We're going to determine, are they definitive? Are they non-definitive? And if they're non-definitive, how authoritative, how weighty is this? And so we're going to evaluate magisterial propositions. And then lastly, a subject that we almost never hear about, but really is very vital to discussions today. And that is my absolute favorite, where I'm writing my dissertation, specifically magisterial reversals. Can certain doctrines that are non-definitively taught by the magisterium, can some of those reverse? And if they can reverse, what kinds of reversals are there? Can we distinguish between different kinds of reversals? And again, if so, what are they? And are there examples of this in church history? And maybe are there instances of reversals that are impossible given the Catholic claims? So that's what we're going to take a look at. 10 lessons, again, once a week. And I do have some recommended reading on here. Certainly Avery Dulles' work on the Magisterium, Teacher and Guardian of the Faith. That's going to be the number one that I recommend to people. Sullivan's works, Ghilardi, By What Authority, and also Jimmy Akin's work, Teaching with Authority. I think those five right there are very helpful. However, it's not required for you to read these in order to take the course. As far as course fees, it's going to be $350 for the course. Like I said, as far as the recommended reading, highly recommend you read them, but it is not absolutely required. So, if you don't have the funds or the time, totally get it. I will not require anyone to, have read this to make sense of the lectures. So don't worry about this. This is just there to help you even further, but it's not absolutely required to make sense of the lectures. Sometimes I've had courses where, you have to do certain reading prerequisite to make sense of the lectures, and I don't really like that. No, we're not doing that here. However, it is still meaningful to go over these. Highly recommended. So that's just kind of a brief outline or intro to the intro course. And like I said, I will also have another course. I think it'll be the semester after that, where I will go over historical instances of the Magisterium. So we're going to talk about ecumenical councils, and we're going to talk about decrees, papal decrees, not only first millennium, but also second millennium as well. So we'll try to do an overview the best that we can for one course of the Magisterium in history. So this one is going to be a little bit more doctrinal in nature. The second course will be more historical. But to make sense of the history, we first have to start with the doctrine. And to make sense of the doctrine, you have to start with Scripture. I think a lot of people miss that. And I really want to hammer that home, the biblical aspect to the Magisterium. There may be some Protestants who are watching whose ears perk up when we speak of that. Yes, the Magisterium, the Catholic Magisterium, is something thoroughly biblical in nature. Very much makes sense of what we see in the Old and New Testament. And I think that Catholic teaching authority, the Magisterium, makes Catholicism unique because there really is no other equivalent to this in any other group that professes the Christian faith. So yeah, that's what is in store for us. Again, June 17th, you will be able to sign up. Monday, I will do another reminder, and I will put in a link for that whenever Monday comes. So stay tuned for that. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have there in the chat. Go ahead and put them to @reason&theology. Let's see. Carlos says, congrats, Michael. I'd like to take your course if my finances and life schedule match. My spiritual advisor told me that I need to start taking courses due to my love of private studies. That'd be awesome. I'd love to have you, Carlos. Let me know. That would be great. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. I do have an email specifically related to the course that I've put here. Let me share it with you. So if it's course related and you have a question, feel free to email me, cpu.lofton@gmail.com. So that would be a good place to contact me if you did have any questions. But yeah, hope we can have you. Matthew says, Old Testament, chair of Moses and 70 elders come to mind. For sure. Yeah, so you certainly have Moses is a very prominent figure as judge and prophet described in the Pentateuch. And that's very, very dominant as far as authority in the Old Testament. And you could argue a great deal of authority up until the time of Jesus really unfolds from the event of Moses and his authority. Certainly the Sanhedrin, right? The great Sanhedrin develops out of Moses and the 70 elders that we see described there in the Pentateuch. That's why the Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, to distinguish between the lesser Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin had 71 judges representing the 70 that Moses chose and Moses himself, with the lesser Sanhedrin being on a more local territory for local communities, and that derives from other parts of the Pentateuch, and that was made up of 23 judges. So we certainly see judges as a prominent role of teaching authority in the Old Testament, but you also have prophets. You also have priests. They have authority as well to an extent, and even kings, right? And they exercise a certain kind of authority. And what I'll do is I'll show that in the Old Testament and how all of that is fulfilled in Jesus Christ in the new covenant. But it doesn't end with Jesus. Jesus established a church with a teaching authority. So everything is fulfilled in Christ. All those things that we see in the Old Testament, judge, prophet, priest, king, fulfilled in Jesus. But then he himself establishes a church with teaching authority, as I'll demonstrate. And it doesn't end with the people that he chose. It has a successive role, just as it did in the Old Testament, has a successive role and continues unto this very day. And that will then show you, okay, the Catholic Magisterium today has roots going all the way back to Jesus. And what we find in Jesus is a fulfillment of teaching authority going all the way back to Moses. Although, of course, we do have instances of authority even prior to Moses. It tended to be more localized, like the head of a family, the patriarch, if you will. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk all about that, in the Old Testament. Like I said, this is something that you don't see a whole lot about, the Old Testament roots. But another thing with this course that I'm offering that you don't see a whole lot about is magisterial reversals and evaluating magisterial propositions. The last two lectures, there's just not a whole lot out there on how to, weigh a magisterial proposition. And there's even less out there on the topic of reversals, which is why I decided to do my dissertation on it, because there's a lacuna there. So you're going to get stuff out of this course that you're generally not going to find elsewhere. The exciting part, in addition to the courses themselves, is we hope to establish a magisterial studies program, the first of its kind. If you've look around for a magisterial studies program, it just does not exist. So the desire here is to create that. And this is the first step in doing so. So I really, really hope that y'all are excited about this and that y'all want to become a part of it. Let me see. Homework and essays. Yes, I'll definitely assign. However, it's not going to be required for you to complete the course. You get out of the course to an extent what you put in. And so that will be there. However, it won't be required in order to get the credit for the class. Let's see what else we have here. Lev says, yes, only the prophet who spoke to God face to face. Interestingly enough, the 70, I believe, are also described as having met with God and spoke to him face to face. Not just Moses, but also the 70, which is interesting, right? Given that we see elsewhere in Scripture, it says no one can see God's face and live, and yet elsewhere it says they spoke to God face to face and they did not die. Let me see if I can find that particular passage. I think it's Exodus. Yeah. Well, hold on. It keeps coming up with Exodus 33. There's a different one. Speaks about they spoke with God face to face and ate and did not die. I'm going to have to find it. It's a curious passage because, again, curious in light of the fact that elsewhere it indicates can't see God face to face. I think it has all kinds of philosophical implications. There's some distinctions there that we're assuming. In one sense, you cannot see God's face and live, and yet in another sense, you can see his face and live. Marcus, thanks, Michael. This will be great. I have a friend who accuses Catholics of being just as relativistic as the Orthodox and Protestants. This will help me greatly. Where do I sign up? Yeah, it's going to be available on Monday. I'll put a link to this on Monday. It's CatholicPolytechnic.org is the website, but the sign up link will be available on Monday, so stay tuned for that. I'll just go back and add it to the description of this video on Monday, but I wanted to break the news with y'all, let y'all know so that you can be aware. The Great Wall asks, is this the pre-incarnate Christ? Funny you should say that, right? That's a large part of the debate. Is it the pre-incarnate Christ? Many fathers would indicate those theophanies in the Old Testament was the pre-incarnate Christ. Mm-hmm. There is language about God communicating to the people of Israel, and then elsewhere the New Testament describes it as angels. So an angelic representation of God in some contexts. Certainly related also to some things Augustine argued. Yeah, that's a pretty in-depth discussion of its own. How do we understand those passages? Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Let's see. But yeah, as far Marcus, as far as what you were saying, Catholics being just as relativistic, yeah, it's so hard for me to take that seriously. If you know anything about Catholic teaching authority, how the Magisterium works, that shows that we're in a different category. Whether Catholics are right or wrong, whether this is established by Christ or not, the teaching authority that we have is substantially different than any kind of authority that you're going to find elsewhere. Let's see. Life says it wasn't literally Christ. It was a representation of God. Augustine is correct. There's different views in the patristic literature. Definitely there are some debates there. Let's see. Let me look through the chat. What else we have here? Matthew says, I may register just to ask questions. That's hilarious. By the way, thank you, Christus, for becoming a member. Great Wall says, excited for this. Matthew says, I'm finishing up a 20K word thesis. Wow, on the protection of the papal magisterium. I'm thinking of sending it your way. Please feel free to do so. I'd like to hear more about that. That's awesome. So yeah, send that to me. If you had any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat at Reason and Theology. I got a few more minutes here. But I'm already starting on the lessons. And again, the first one is the Old Testament roots. So I'm preparing that as we speak. Getting a head start on it. Yeah, really excited about these. Great Wall says, I would love to see some videos on this at some point if you don't have any already. Pre-incarnate Christ has been on my mind a lot lately. Yeah, I don't think I've done any specifically on it. However, it has come up in videos about the essence and energies distinction versus Thomism. That's kind of come up in relation to those discussions. Professor Lofton, Bob the Builder said, yeah, pretty crazy, right? Uh, I kind of feel like it's long overdue because I wanted to I wanted to teach many years ago, but God in His providence had other plans for me at the time, and so. But here we are. And by the way, I'm going to do that in addition to Reason and Theology. So don't think that I'm not going to be doing R&T anymore. No, I intend to have a career teaching and also with online content creation. I intend to do both. Um, but it will be nice to do both. Because the online scene can sometimes get a little toxic. So it'll be nice to have a little bit of a different setting with the classes. But at the same time, I think it's important to reach people with content creation here on YouTube. And so I'm going to continue to do that. Don't worry. R&T is not going anywhere. I can do both. Let's see. Marie says, I would never believe that because view of what you've made up. God nature is too powerful for human beings and flesh and blood can withstanding the consequences of his life. I don't understand what you're saying. Pay as you go or in full. I'm not sure I understand your comment, Marie. Maybe if you can clarify. What's my favorite council? Probably the Council of Trent, just because how successful it was. I remember having a whole class on that at Christendom and just kind of seeing how successful the Council of Trent was, what all it accomplished. Certainly much more successful than most of the ecumenical councils. When you study the acts of the ecumenical councils, the ones that are extant today, it's interesting. And you look at their reception, that's also interesting. Often they're not received very well, especially the ones in the first millennium. The essence and energies distinction is a formal distinction, meaning the energies are incorporeal, not actual parts, as the Neopalamites pervert it and make it polytheism. There's a debate on what kind of distinction it is. Yeah. Marie is talking about the course. Do you have to pay up front or is it as you? I think it's going to be up front, but I mean, certainly contact the university if you do have questions about maybe payment plans or something like that. Wouldn't hurt to contact them and see what they say. Trent's liturgical reform took a long time to be realized. Should be a sign for us to calm down and be patient today. Seems like that's the case with every council. They're usually not received very well. I mean, they're usually disastrous. By the way, we look back on them and appreciate their contributions, but at the time, as they're going on and in their immediate wake, they're not always immediately received. Oh, I did get a response here from Chris. You can do a payment plan. You can do pay as you go. Yes, so that is an option. So that will be available. Like I said, Monday is when you will be able to sign up, and highly recommend that you do. Like I said, this is going to be unique. There really isn't anything out there along these lines, and it also is going to help us contribute towards initiating a magisterial studies program. So I hope y'all are excited about that and want to see that. Mitchell says Molinism, Thomism, or neither. Oh boy, that takes me back to some of the earliest streams here on Reason and Theology. They surrounded those questions. Maybe go and check those out. Interestingly, I had William Lane Craig on the show to defend Molinism, so check that out. But I've also had plenty of Thomists on. In fact, my dean from Christendom, R.J. Matava, is a Thomist, and I had him on discussing all sorts of issues related to it. But also I've had on Gavin Kerr, among others. So need the site to register. Yeah, it'll the link will be up Monday, so stay tuned for that. You could just circle back to this video stream where I'll put it in the show notes. It's going to be at the CatholicPolytechnic.org website. There will be a place for you to sign up under the certificate program. It's just not available yet, but it will be on Monday. So just circle back here on Monday. I'll put a link to it. I'll also do another video on Monday saying, hey, here's the link. So just keep an eye out for that. But I wanted to bring this to your attention now so you have a heads up, an idea of what's to come. Nobody in the flesh can see God because of his nature. Right. I mean, you have scriptures that say that, right? And then you have other scriptures that says that Moses spoke to God face to face, and you have other scriptures that say that the elders with Moses also saw God's face. I think we have to make some important distinctions there, because I don't believe in biblical contradictions. I believe in biblical inerrancy. And often that tension is coming from the same books. So, so obviously the sacred author would have noticed these things. And so I think that we have to assume some important distinctions here. But there is somewhat of a debate on what those distinctions are. Chris says, I want to thank you and Voice of Reason for bringing me back to the faith. I'm really happy to hear about that. Thank you for letting us know. And I'm glad that the content has helped, and let me know if I can help in any way. David says, reception of ecumenical councils reminds me of Trad's reject of Vatican II because of implementation. Wait till they see the Council of Nicaea. Well, I've mapped out some of the parallels, right? I've done multiple videos showing the parallels between some Catholics who dissent against the Magisterium, whether it's Vatican II or recent papal magisterial documents. And I show how often there is a parallel between their behavior and their kind of dissent with those who dissented against Chalcedon, for instance. It's fascinating to see how history repeats itself. What are my thoughts on Freemasons? I do have multiple videos, but the Catholic Church shows that and says, and has even recently said, as recently as a few months ago in a new document, that Freemasonry is incompatible with the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith. Any interviews coming on? Oh, good question. I don't know. Do I have any? I'd have to look. Let's see. Yeah, I'd have to look through here. And I need to set some up. I did a few right before my trip, but I need to set some up. And doesn't look like I've really done that. So maybe if you have some recommendations, let me know. Let's see. Need some more masked streams? I don't know what I'm... Oh, are you talking about like the streams with me and Voice of Reason? Right. Let's see. World Economic Forum. Any thoughts on it? I'll do more studies on it. Haven't looked into it in any kind of depth to speak authoritatively on it. Let's see what else we got in the chat. All right. Any other questions, especially related to the course? Anything that you wanted to know about what we might be covering? Certainly willing to stick around for a few more minutes and answer anything that you may have. Dawkins recently came out, said he would miss Britain being Christian company because of the aesthetics. Any knowledge or thoughts on him? Are people still taking Dawkins seriously? I thought that was kind of over. Which councils talked about Christology? Well, first 7 ecumenical councils were all about Christology, and yes, I'm including the 7th, which is about icons. But icons is a Christological point. So, yeah, all 7 of them are specifically about Christology. Um, for theology, what's most foundational is the concept of the Trinity and the Incarnation. In fact, you have Aquinas in his Summa who notes that, because pretty much everything else from theology flows out from the Trinity and the Incarnation. And so those are concepts that the church had to really, really work through and become precise in articulating and had to develop before it could really branch out and speak about other things. Yeah, how to have discernment if you're called to the priesthood, monasticism, or marriage. Great question. Well, one rule of thumb is God speaks through circumstances. So if you are in a position where those three are options, yeah, you certainly want to really pursue discerning between these things, as opposed to others where their circumstances may not allow priesthood or monasticism or something like that. Well, God's speaking to you through your circumstances. Yeah. But I would highly recommend that you speak to a knowledgeable priest around you, and certainly a religious person around you about the monastic life, and then a good married couple, and talk to them about the questions that you have. That will certainly help. Why do many Orthodox reject the Eighth Ecumenical Council? Well, they also reject what constitutes the Eighth Ecumenical Council, right? There's a whole debate on that. But as far as our Eighth Ecumenical Council, which at one point Constantinople accepted, well, it has the papal claims in it. That's in part why. Let's see. Love Aquinas, but he was wrong on some major issues, Lev says. I was wondering more about the Incarnation specifically. Is that in a specific council? Well, the Incarnation is really at the heart of Nicaea 1. It's going to be at the heart of also Constantinople 1. It is at the heart of Ephesus. It's at the heart of Chalcedon. It's at the heart of Constantinople 2. It's at the heart of Constantinople 3. And it's at the heart of Nicaea 2. So all 7 ecumenical councils, the Incarnation is at the heart of each one of those. We can't speak of the issue of 1 versus 2 wills, or does Jesus does Jesus have 1 or 2 natures? We can't have those discussions without the Incarnation, so yeah, I would say all 7. Yeah. Here we go. Will the course go into detail about hermeneutics of the Magisterium? That is, will it talk about how to interpret magisterial documents? What about apparent discontinuity in the Magisterium? Yeah, excellent question. So yeah, let me show the syllabus again. All right. So as far as interpreting magisterial documents, that's going to be right here in evaluating magisterial propositions, building off of everything that we learned up until that point. But we can't really do that until we go over those lectures specifically. So yes, the 9th lecture will be all about that. And as far as apparent discontinuity, that's this lecture right here, magisterial reversals. To what degree can we speak of discontinuity? That's going to be part of it. Well, I would certainly also recommend reading Benedict's Christmas address to the cardinals, where this is discussed, the hermeneutic of continuity, as it's often called. The language he uses is hermeneutic of reform, which is a point most people often miss. And that's an important distinction. He doesn't call it hermeneutic of continuity. Although It is called hermeneutic of discontinuity. Like the opposite is called hermeneutic of discontinuity. But he speaks of the opposite of that as hermeneutic of reform. Why is that important? Because there's going to be a continuity in the substance of the teaching, whereas there may be points of departure and accidental features, and rupture and accidental features. Um, so that's really an important point to note, and I'll go over that in more detail in the lecture on reversals. And so yeah, we're going to be talking about that. Is there discontinuity? And if so, what kind? What kind can there be? What kind, is impossible? If there are certain points of discontinuity, would they falsify the Catholic claims? I would argue yes, certain kinds of discontinuity, specifically the reversal of a dogmatic proposition. I would say that's a falsification of the Catholic claims. So certainly that's out of the question, and that hasn't happened. But might there be reversals in the language that is used to describe a dogma, supposing that the substance of the proposition remains the same? Yes. And we have John Paul II explicitly saying that. And so I'm going to kind of go over that in that lecture the best that I can. There's a whole lot to talk about there, but I'll do as the best that I can to cram it into an hour and 15 minutes, because I want to allow for 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So yeah, much more can be said on that point in particular. That's specifically what my dissertation is about, engaging that point. Okay. Michael says, hi, Michael. Hey, good to see you. Glad to have you here. Great Wall says, so pretty much all 7 councils. Yes. Jorge says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became and dwelt among us. Yeah. So John 1 and John 1:14, right? John 1:1 and 1:14. Yeah. The second gospel, as it's called, right? So, yeah, one of my favorite passages from Scripture. In fact, when I was first new to Christianity and I asked about the Trinity, that was the proof text that was given to me to first establish that Jesus is God, and it's a good one. He was God from the very beginning and then took on our humanity when he was conceived in Mary's womb. God, 100% God and 100% man. Yeah. Michael says, I appreciated you bringing Benny Hinn up. Yep. I'll probably do some more on the charismatic movement, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, I have a handful of videos about Benny Hinn, Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar, and others. And it's coming back up because of recent claims made by Benny Hinn that he repented of the prosperity gospel, but he's clearly right back to the prosperity gospel. So it's coming back up. Anyways, well, I think I grabbed everything. Teresa says, hey, I finally caught up. Hey, great to see you, by the way, Teresa. Yeah, you made it at the end. Is there a definitive teaching that Christ didn't have a physical body before the incarnation? Well, I mean, yes. I mean, if he yeah, no, the human nature did not exist prior to the incarnation. That would yield a whole plethora of heresies. And yes, that is something that the early church excluded, because there were people who had that position, the adoptionist view specifically, that was immediately ruled out. And we're talking about even prior to Nicaea 1. That was a very early heresy. Yeah, no. Golly, that would have so many implications. So no. Any rankings of the popes from good to anti being included? Where do we begin? You can't see it, but to the right of me, I got it from St. Peter's Basilica. They have a little gift shop there, but I have a list of all the popes, and it has all the popes there for you with a description of them. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so you get to kind of see them all from Peter to Pope Francis. That has to upset the set of Acontis when they see that. Marie says, the reason I will take the course is to prepare myself to become a nun when I retire. That's pretty cool. That's awesome. I mean, more like the resurrected body before and then emptying himself of it. I don't know if I'm following the question. So you initially asked, is there a definitive teaching that Christ didn't have a physical body before the incarnation? I mean, more like the resurrected body before and then emptying himself of it. I'm not following the question. The second part, you might have to clarify for me. Let's see. How could you say that early Nicaea was heresy? I said the exact opposite. I hold to all seven ecumenical councils, including Nicaea 1. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not my position. I would say anybody who would reject Nicaea 1 is a heretic. Great Wall says, I find it hard to imagine he wasn't always God and man if he doesn't change. Well, you don't have... so the incarnation takes place in time. You don't have an eternal body of Jesus Christ. The human body did not eternally exist. You do have the incarnation, beginning at the moment of the Annunciation. If you would argue otherwise, you couldn't really say that this is a human body and a human nature if it eternally existed. And you couldn't have something physical and material existing eternally like that. So there's just no way to maintain that in any kind of orthodox sense. As far as he doesn't change, well, he took on human flesh without altering his divinity. So his divinity didn't change. He takes on human flesh. It's a taking on of something, not an alteration of his nature or his personhood. Let's see. I'm not trying to be heretical, so I was wondering if there was a definitive teaching on him not having a body beforehand. Yeah, I would say that's definitively excluded in the concept of the incarnation. Yeah. So, I mean, like if he had a body beforehand, we couldn't even speak of the incarnation or the Virgin Mary giving birth to Jesus. So it's that would be definitively excluded. Let's see. Okay, so Martha says, I just started listening. Is the course free or is there a charge? It's $350. Is our resurrected body not going to have a material quality to it that will then be eternal? I think we're confusing notions here. Our resurrected body living without end moving forward wouldn't be eternal, because eternal would have to assume like pre-existence. It goes both ways rather than just one way. In fact, I'm pretty sure Aquinas uses a term to distinguish between the two. I forget what term he uses offhand, though. But it's a term that he uses for angels. He would distinguish between the eternity of God versus how angels are in relation to time. Yeah, I forget the term he uses. He certainly goes over it in the Summa in great detail. Yeah, so an eternal body of Jesus would make Christ's incarnation a reincarnation. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and it would have to alter, not it would also have to alter his human nature, because how can we speak of a human nature prior to the incarnation, but then speak of the Virgin Mary giving birth to, like, she's not giving birth to a fully grown human being, right? Let's see. Hmm. Would culture have a big effect on how one views the authority of the magisterium? Current Americans are pretty anti-authority. You're spot on, Jen. You're spot on. I think that our anti-authoritarian position that you find in America is at the heart of a lot of the dissent of American Catholics. Not always, but among some. Yeah, I think that's at the heart of it. And it's ultimately a Protestant disposition to teaching authority. It is by no means Catholic. Yeah, it's a good observation. Okay. Well, I think I grabbed everything. Stay tuned Monday for that link. I'll do another stream where I'll have that available to you. It'll be at the Catholic Polytechnic.org website. There will be a certificate section there that will have a link that will work at the time. Right now, there aren't any links for that, but I will have that available on Monday, and I'll also go back after the fact and put the link here in the show notes. So if you're watching this on Monday, you can just check the show notes now, and it'll be available. And looking forward to having y'all, for those of you who sign up, and really excited about this. I hope y'all are too. This is going to be awesome. Great Wall says, thanks for your thoughts on my question. Yeah, absolutely. And glad that you were recently received in the church. That is really exciting. We'll continue to pray for you. All right, everybody, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. And definitely share this with any of your friends that you believe would be interested in signing up for this course. And again, one doesn't even have to be a Catholic to sign up. If you're a non-Catholic, that's fine as well. So this is for Catholics and non-Catholics who want to understand how Catholic teaching authority works. So, all right. Thank y'all so much. We'll see you later. God bless. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.